Beth Markley, how are you?
I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm doing swimmingly. We are here today. You are the executive director of the Idaho organization of the National Alliance for Mental Illness.
Correct.
This is a big thing. It's a big thing, not just in Idaho. It's a big thing in our country. I have a lot of friends who are struggle, and I've absolutely have struggled myself. We also live in a state that is in a difficult spot because when you think about the fundamental industries in our state, you have farming and you have construction, right? So you have ag and you have construction broadly, and those are two of the top industries for suicide, mental illness. We are in a very difficult time of our country where we are experiencing runs of suicide with our young people because of the disconnectedness they feel with technology. We've also integrated technology fundamentally into their education systems. You have your work cut out for you, but help me understand what your organization does and how you support Idahoans.
Right. So we provide support, education, and advocacy. So that's a very top level. Advocacy can mean anything from talking to our congressional delegation to talking to legislators to talking to folks in the workforce, just bringing the conversation out there, advocating for, changing our language around mental illness, advocating for just having a conversation around mental illness. And that's including, when it comes to policy, but just also, debunking stigma about mental illness. And then education, we have our evidence-based courses. If you have somebody who you're caring for with a mental illness, or you want to support with a mental illness, or you have a mental illness, we have our evidence-based classes that over time, or just give information about self-care, methods for seeking resources, and all sorts of stuff. And then really our bread and butter is our support groups. So if you're a person with a mental illness, or you're a person who, like I said, supports someone with mental illness, friends and family, there's a support group for you, either in person or online.
This supplying help with mental illness is one of the big pieces that there are many states around us, especially the coastal states, that have large populations of mentally ill people. And they've also put policies into play like legalizing drugs to the degree that you see in, say, Oregon, or tolerating them even though they're illegal, as you see in, the state that shall not be named. You have these problems, and they're addressed in a lot of different ways. But one broad criticism is that the assistance to people with mental illnesses is not being delivered, right? They're like, these people are not criminals. They have mental illnesses, but we also have legal preventions from involuntarily institutionalizing people. It's like, no, you can't force them into recovery. So like, when you're saying, hey, if you're somebody with a mental illness, what are mechanisms that you guys have in place to get people to voluntarily engage in your programs that help them right the ship, get them on track, and kind of get their life going again?
Right. Well, let me set the context for
Please.
you here, especially since we're talking about this crossover with substance use. And when we talk about co-occurring disorders, we're talking about somebody who has a mental health issue and also possibly has a substance use issue. So when we talk about substance use in particular, you have to think about 50% of the time, if you have a mental health issue, symptoms are going to show up by age 14, 75% of the time by age 25. So this is also an age range when there's a lot of stuff going on, including exposure to elements that maybe self-medication elements, risk-taking behaviors. A lot of your peers are doing a lot of unsavory things just to pass the time and have recreation or whatever in this time frame. Another statistic that's really interesting to me is the amount of time on average, and this is nationwide, between the onset of mental health symptoms and the time when somebody starts to seek treatment is 11 years. So if you start to show symptoms of a mental illness at a very early age, say 15, 16, 17, by the time you get appropriate healthy treatment for that, or by the time you realize you need to seek treatment for that, not even getting onto an appropriate course of treatment or getting the right medication or right therapy or whatever it is, 11 years have gone by, almost more than half or almost half your life. And during a time when you have a propensity for taking risks, during a time when there's a lot of influence out there, and there's the quick fix. sometimes of substance. So that's one thing to keep in mind. If it's hard to access resources, if it's hard to access healthcare, if there are long wait times for appropriate professionals, psychiatrists, you're gonna seek help elsewhere. A lot of times with serious mental illness, there is a part of that mental illness that keeps you from understanding that you are sick. That can be poor insight is how we call that, or anosognosia. That's actually a frontal lobe disorder, like part of people with schizophrenia or bipolar disorder. Many of them don't believe that they are sick. So encouraging them to get expensive, hard to get treatment with medications sometimes that have, hard side effects that is negative reinforcement. I mean, that's really tough. On top of it, all of that stuff is kind of hard to get, especially in a place like Idaho, where every county in the state is a federally designated mental health shortage area. So
when you say every county in the state, that means that the United States government has a designation that they use for when you have like a certain population, and then obviously programs or providers, and they're like, okay, everyone here lacks the threshold number to be off this list.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Correct.
Interesting.
So we have too few psychiatric hospital beds per capita. We have too few professionals per capita. So yes, we have too few resources.
Is that? I'm sorry to interrupt. Is that common?
Is it common?
Okay. Well, let me put it this way. I do not experience in this state the same kind of public difficulty that with homelessness and other things that you see in other states that are our neighbors. So, right. So like, do they have a lot of beds that just go unutilized, or is it like?
Well, no place is it great.
Okay.
And no place in the world, for that matter, is it great. But there are states where there are systems in place to support people with mental illness. There are systems in place to support people who have substance use issues. There are states that spend a lot more money on hospitals and have providers, and so it's not as bad. And when people are coming here from other states, I just had a woman this morning asking me, I'd like to relocate my daughter who lives in Oregon. She needs supportive housing, and I'm in Idaho. What do I do? And I pushed this out to one of our parent volunteers, and I said, you had the exact same situation. Help me understand what this woman is going through, because I happen to know that other states have better supportive housing situations. So, moving your kiddo to Idaho may not be the best, depending on what your situation is.
What's a supporting housing situation? This somebody who's like an adult that still has a debilitating mental illness, and the idea is like, okay, you might be able to maintain some level of professional engagement, say like a cleaning company or whatever. I don't know exactly what it would be, but you have somebody that just needs that supportive mechanism. It's like you can't just unleash them onto the free house, or do they get decreased rent, or like what is it?
There's a lot of different ways to answer that question. I'm not an expert on that, but it could be that there is somebody who is making sure that they're taking their medication,
Gotcha.
making sure that they're reporting to their medical provider, and so forth, and all the way through, depending upon what their skill set is. So there's a shortage of that in Idaho as well. So there's a lot of different things that go into that original question, which I forget what it was. About
getting people to voluntarily engage in this stuff. One you brought up teens, right? So I have a friend who had a teen son that turned out later on to have real problems, but they didn't know when he was a teen. Right. They were just like, okay, it could be teen hormones, could be whatever, very aggressive, very, out there, up and down behavior. And looking back on it, my friend's like, listen, if I'd known, I would have, either kicked him out of the house or done something, treated it differently. Not, like gotten the requisite, but like, hey, it would have been different. But we didn't know, because you're dealing with a population that is going through a lot of character changes and dealing with, even in the best of circumstances, like, it's like I was a teen boy at one point. Like I remember being like, "Rawr," at times.
And there's a ton of people who are willing to give you really bad advice when you have a child who is going through those formative years and they're behaving badly. And there's a lot of people who say, well, tough love and set boundaries and kick them out. But there's also mental illnesses that start at that age where, take schizophrenia, for example, there is the prodromal phase of schizophrenia that is marked by increased risk taking, antagonizing people, being angry, being paranoid, being taking risks. I think I mentioned that before, but a lot of these things look like just adolescence. Right. Yeah. So it can be very, very difficult. In hindsight, once a person goes into psychosis, that's like one of the definitive measures of how to diagnose schizophrenia. But until that point, they're just acting like a person you just really don't want to be around. And so sometimes, I talked about that 11-year gap. Sometimes by the time the person is ready to seek help, they've alienated a whole bunch of their support system. So they're on their own. So that makes it, that much more difficult to get access.
Right. You kind of dug yourself into a hole. And I would have to assume that part of that 11-year gap is getting, and again, I know people talk about it with regard to alcoholism. It's like hitting rock bottom where you're like, okay, look, there's something going on and this is not work. Like my life choices or the way I'm moving through this world are not aligning with how I want to exist in the world. Like I either have no relationships or I don't have friends or like I'm not able to hold down steady job, not be able to move through the world like I want. And you have to hit that point hard enough. You're like, okay, I need some kind of help because this isn't working.
Right. And imagine you're at that point and nobody can tell you how to dig your way out of it, or you have no resources left, or you have no health care. And all of those things can conspire to keep you from, regardless of what your free will is telling you to do. There's a lot of obstacles to getting that kind of care that you need, unless you have a really strong support group. You have family members, people with resources, people who are just going to push through and find you the support you need. And I can tell you some of the things that, some of the symptoms of mental illness have to do with, they are things like low motivation and poor executive function. And, ask that person to fill out a 36-page, Medicaid application. It is going to be something that's a really tall order for someone. Oh my gosh. So yeah, we need support systems. And I also think a big problem with people accessing the care that they need is stigma, right? And so when we treat mental illness like a joke, when we say that, when we use diagnosis to describe things that aren't that way, the weather is bipolar. Well, no, it's just weather. It's just Idaho changing weather, right?
I call it a tricky mistress, but I don't know if that's normalizing adultery or something.
I don't know. But when we can change to people first language, when we can say this is a person with schizophrenia, this is a person with bipolar disorder, when we can, normalize having conversations about it, and young people are getting better about this. People my generation and older are still in that space where they're just like, back in the day, they used to say, she's got the cancer, because you couldn't say cancer out loud. It was a stigma against cancer. Well, I found out earlier in the 50s, there was stigma against polio, right? And how did we get past that stigma? We normalize talking about it. And we make it normal for the kids to say, I'm not feeling all right. And I'm guilty of this when my 15-year-old came to me and said, I'm feeling anxiety and it's debilitating and it's making it hard for me to live my life. I was like, well, you should just get outside and get some sunlight and maybe some better sleep or whatever.
Drink some water.
Yeah, drink some water. There's a lot of things that a good diet and exercise and sunlight and getting out from in front of the screen will take care of. There are some medical conditions that just make that's just part of the therapy, right? So there are medical conditions that do actually need more than just that. So, and then, here we are coming out of a worldwide pandemic and we're still feeling the effects of that. And you talked a little bit about people are in a position now where, political stuff is really triggering for a lot of folks these days. There's a lot of worry. There's, what's going to happen to my job, my healthcare, the economy, whatever, fill in the blank, right? So that's circumstantial anxiety. And, that can continue, that can blossom into something more substantial if you don't address it.
Could I ask you something about this? I have a very good friend whose husband, apparently had like a big break. And this guy, a few years back, started going down a rabbit hole. And I've met a lot of people that I'm like, oh no, are they going this direction? But again, the point is that it appears to be the case that people can go so far down rabbit holes on, like, say, watching YouTube videos on, conspiracies. And I'm not saying conspiracies don't exist, but like overwhelming to the point where they have these psychotic breaks. They can't continue functioning on a regular basis. All they can focus on are these anxieties. And it seems like the circumstantial stuff where it's like the environment that they're in is so triggering and so upsetting, and they can't make sense of it in the world, that it's like they just break, right? And people flippantly talk about, how do they put it? Trump derangement syndrome, TDS, right? And I've had a friend of mine was telling me that he had to cut ties with people because anytime he talked to them, all they would do is start railing on, and he's like, President Trump. And it's like, how horrible. He's like, man, like, can we talk about something? And that's all they could talk about. You have these anxieties, like, and it seems that they're becoming far more prevalent with our access to more self-fulfilling information or customized media feeds, right? It's designed by you, right? And if you watch really upsetting stuff, you're just fed more upsetting stuff over and over and over. So it seems that environment, even though the environment itself, physical environment, may not be that bad, people produce a mental environment where they just, like, their head just breaks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that like on the rise, or is that something that is acknowledged, or is that even something that's real? You're like, nah, like, we know people spend a lot of time on social media, but like, that's not really driving psychosis.
Well, okay. So there is that. And then there's a legitimate, illness of schizophrenia that includes psychosis that is genetic and has and I don't know that there's like legitimately ways that you can rewire your brain if you're listening to stuff and you're going down rabbit holes and you're constantly seeking and chasing and
you're getting more and more anxious, and you're supplied with more and more ammunition, if you will, to be anxious.
And the thing is, it's incumbent on all of us to recognize the physiological changes that happen when you're seeking that sort of thing, and that increased heart rate and that increased agitation and decreased patience with your family. All of those are not good things. And I will say that I'm not an expert. I'm not a medical person. That's not my background. I will say that it's incumbent on all of us to like have that ability to self-reflect and recognize when a particular course of action is not healthy for us, and boundaries need to be set. And I don't know the answer to, the person who is living with somebody who is going down that path. But you can set boundaries with people, whether or not they have a mental illness, and say, I require peace in my home, and I'm not peaceful when you're railing at me. So I'm going to restrict time with you, right? And I'm gonna set that boundary because it makes me feel tense and anxious. And maybe that person gets that, maybe they don't. But is that mental illness? I mean, rage is not a mental illness. Somebody who is enraged and just allows that emotion to continue to flourish, there could be some really bad outcomes. And there are certain things that you can do if you recognize that and you don't like you're living your life that way, just like that person hitting rock bottom, to rewire your brain. Cognitive behavioral therapy. There's a lot of things that a person can do if they just don't feel like they like the way they're living. Is it mental illness? I think, is it in the diagnostic manual? I don't know that, gotcha. But I don't know that it leads to a healthy, fulfilling life. And if you just have to make that call on your own.
Yeah. I have another friend who actually, his first marriage ended up in divorce. His spouse got completely addicted to social media, and she could not break herself away from it. So he'd like wake up at 3 a.m. to go on a business trip, and she'd be there just like death scroll, like just and more and more and more obsessed, until it was like, oh my gosh, like I can't do this with you anymore.
Yeah.
Like you're gonzo. It's just.
And addiction you can become addicted to anything, right? So an addiction is I think characterized, and again, I'm not a clinician, as something that like it takes over like the rest functioning. It takes over the quality of life, right? So you just indulge it to the point where the rest of your life is being impacted in a negative way. So you're reducing time with friends and family. You're not getting your exercise. You're not sleeping. Those are all signs that something needs to change. And if somebody is saying, no, I'm not, it's not a problem, it's not a problem, and you're trying to convince them otherwise, you might say, but you know what? You haven't been out with the kids for months. You never eat dinner at the table. You aren't sleeping at night.
Right.
You are angry with me constantly. And as an individual, like, all you can do is address what brings peace in your life. You can't change somebody else. But if living with somebody like that is not making your life peaceful in the way that you want to be, you have to address what you can control. And a lot of, we were talking about some of the work that NAMI does. And a lot of the time when you're involved with somebody with a mental illness, or you have a mental illness, one of the biggest problems is isolation and stigma, right? So you feel like you can't talk about you go into work and you're bleary-eyed because you've been at the emergency room with your suicidal teen all night, right? You don't feel like you can talk about that at work because you're going to get a whole host of bad advice. You're going to get people who judge you because maybe you're a bad parent. What did you do to make your kid suicidal, right? That stigma is debilitating, and that isolation is deadly. And going to a support group where people with lived experience are discussing what's going on around the table and guiding that conversation and laughing at the same dark sense of humor kind of stuff, and seeing opportunities for hope and connection. Like I get so much out of these groups because I go, and to a person, every single person is dealing with some horrific stuff. You've got a kid living under the bridge because they believe that they've got the patent for like cold fusion or some stuff, whatever. The kid who's involved with, the law because they can't manage to not stalk somebody. They've got people who are in really dire circumstances. And I think, as a facilitator, I'm not helping any of these people. And I feel really like, it's really rough sitting through that 90 minutes and listening to all this. And at the end, we go through the, what we learned at the session, the principles of support, and what principle in particular that NAMI has up on a wall resonated the most with you. And a lot of folks say, I got so much out of sharing with you all. I can't tell my friends this. I can't tell my family this. I get judged. I get bad advice. And I feel so much lighter laughing with you all about the stupid stuff that we're going through and commiserating with you all and getting advice, that just that 90 minutes of just feeling the room lighten bolsters people for the next little while. And it's that connection that is the antithesis of stigma, right? So we need to connect with each other and say, I see what you're going through and you're not alone. And that's really key for a lot of these folks.
Yeah. Isn't that at the heart of so much of our capacity to tolerate pain and suffering, right? Like that's the heart of the human condition, having somebody else there that's like, you're going through it. And again, my boys are still young, and God willing, we won't have to address, things to this degree, my wife and I with them as they get older. But, even going through the younger years where, when COVID started, we were, my youngest was like 3. Right. And we couldn't go to parks. We couldn't leave our property. Like we really got into, like, I was born and raised and lived until I moved here in the same 5-mile radius my whole life. Right. And all of my friends were there. All of my, my family lived in the area, the whole thing. And going through that experience was so atrocious that it literally led us to leave the state and move here. My wife had actually never been to Idaho before we pulled up to the house. So we really, like, imagine what headspace people must have been in to drive them that far and that hard and like make that leap. It was wild, right? It's like there's my before COVID life and my after COVID life as I'm starting to understand what my life story is going to be. But going through that time, it was so difficult and painful. And there was like no one to talk to. I remember in the beginning of 21, I went out, I was having a horrible time. Like it was like red alert. This is really bad, and I go out to, my whole support group stemmed around my jiu-jitsu community. Those are like my dear friends. I saw them every single day, like we'd go through these things, and do life together. And that was all ripped apart. And I went out and grabbed a drink, which was the only thing you could do. You could only ask somebody to go out, and you can't say like, do you want to go out and get tater tots? Like it would have to be like, do you want to get a beer? And like, I don't want to drink. Dynamic. Like drinking is not the answer anymore. Like anyway, but I did. I sucked down this cider or whatever it was. Ugh, I can't do ciders. Anyway, but I did it just to see this friend, and he he really outlined, he's like, listen, the reason you're freaking out is because you had, like mastery, you had community, you had, all these people that you could talk to, and they would confide in you. All of these things are gone.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really then when I realized how detrimental our situation was, because we had no support. Even if it was just complaining to somebody or having somebody complain to you, and you be like, I really like you point out dark humor. I always like, that's really, you got to laugh at some of the things.
Yeah.
You're like, let people cry, let them scream, and then like make a bad joke and like bring it full circle. But without that connection, man, it's like you can't get there.
There's
right?
a ton of social science behind this. I mean, a lack of connectivity is deadly. I mean, it's really deadly. You should, and if you ever have read Bowling Alone,
no,
or the same social scientist, and I forget his name. Oh, I'm going to remember it after I leave. But also wrote Join or Die, about the decrease in like joining clubs, and what that has done to our social foundation as a society. And it is deadly. We are a social species. And so when you have a condition that makes you feel isolated and makes you feel judged, you kind of wither away, you kind of sink into yourself, and you don't seek support. So, and it's especially profound in cultures like, say, Hispanic cultures, where, there's this machismo, and they don't necessarily even have in Spanish the same language around mental illness as we do in English. So, it's more profound from culture to culture. That isolation is part of the problem. And so, there's big, profound policy things. There's big gaps in what we need in this state, but there's also stuff that we can do if we connect with people, and share, and people feel comfortable and safe in doing that kind of sharing.
I didn't, when you say machismo, right? I was literally going to ask you, you're like, there are all these problems. It's like, yeah, like being a guy, because one thing I really started to understand, even before COVID, was like, wait a minute. Who are our friends? Like,
Mm-hmm.
we only have friends. I had a friend that started doing jiu-jitsu. This guy, Jeff, works for Apple, super cool guy. But he's like this nerdy engineer. He's like got these skinny fingers. And it's just like, initially we were like trained together. I'm like, because like and he's like this older guy. And we became really dear friends. He dropped like a Monty Python joke, and I followed up. I was like, all right, man, like we're good. And he's really, really bright and intelligent. And we became very dear friends. And I asked him, I was like, Jeff, you're in your early 50s. Outside of this jiu-jitsu community that, you're engaged and deeply engaged in now, like, do you have friends? He's like, well, there's this guy where I'm like, no. Do you have friends outside of work? Right? Even friends at work, do you see them outside of work? He's like, no, I don't. I'm like, well, who were your friends? He's like, I literally didn't have any. And I started looking around. It's not uncommon to see groups of women that are engaged in social pursuits, right? Be it clubs or whatever, but you don't have like the Lions, den or whatever. You don't have the older male societal groups that are understood as fundamental to mental wellness as people, as males in particular, age and community, and they leave their professional engagements. Now it's like, okay, but those were my only friends. Those I never even saw them outside of work, but it was my routine to see them in work. Like, do you have in your work? Do you guys see a higher population of like older men than you would see older women that start suffering from loneliness and issues like that?
Honestly, we don't. I mean, truthfully, we get the folks who are in our support groups. I mean, it's a pretty good mix. What I get in the family support groups are parents typically of adult children with serious mental illness, right?
Gotcha.
And then within the peer groups or the people with mental illness, I think it's a pretty good mix, and it's people with it doesn't even have to be diagnosed. So it's anxiety, it's depression, it's a range of different things. But it's still a pretty good mix. But I will say,
so bottom line, life is hard.
Life is hard.
It's just really hard.
And I think every demographic is going to have a different issue that is specifically kind of hard to them.
That's a good point. So whereas loneliness and isolation might be a problem, let's say slightly more of a problem for males age 60 and older, women age 60 and older likely have their own struggles. It just may not stem from isolation.
Right. And that's true.
A great point.
I mean, no matter who you are, though,
Sure.
you should recognize that connection is a key factor in longevity. There's a lot of data on this. So, finding a club, finding a church group, a book club, organizing a neighborhood group or whatever it is, think about who is in your social structure. If there's not anybody there who is going to say, how are you really? Like, how are you really? Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, dude, I haven't seen you. And then when I do, I can feel it. There's just something different. What's going on? I mean, if you don't have somebody who's going to sit you down and say, level with me, this is not who you are. Like, what's going on? If you don't have that, it means that you need to probably take a look at how are you structuring your life? How are you getting out there? I have good friends who we've been friends since college, and her daughter is my goddaughter, and she was just railing on her. She's like, "Mom, you gotta join." I mean, I'm in Rotary, so I'm in this social circle and we have a running group and we do service projects and blah blah blah. But she was really railing on her mom, like, "You got to join Rotary. I'm worried about you." Like, I just remember railing on my dad for smoking when I was that age. Like, "Dad, you are going to kill yourself." And she's doing the same thing with her mom. Like, "You got to connect with people. I just don't want to see you become this lonely old woman who's doddering around the house and has no social structure." So you see people living longer lives when they have connection, and those sources of connection are through those traditional things like church, political groups, social clubs, service clubs, whatever. Like, get out and join and connect with people. You've got jiu-jitsu and people are connecting in other ways through that. And I think that's just amazing.
Yes, and it is one of those things. I have friends that are in their 50s and 60s that engage in it, and they're not, the same engagement level that they once were, but it is one of those things where it's something you can continue doing, and they have that consistency, and they have those people. You know what I find so funny too? It kind of became clear that it's like, listen, these are your friends, and some of them bug the hell out of you, but they're still your friends. Like,
you just get to work on those coping mechanisms around certain people, right?
Yeah. Or like, but there was something comforting about being annoyed with somebody, but knowing that it's like, yeah, but they're still part of the clan. Like, right. Because I think there was, at least for me, an anxiety as a younger person that it's like, okay, if I don't get along with people, I'm going to get like excommunicated. So then there's an anxiety about presenting an authentic character, right? That it's like, oh no, because I can't like really be myself. I always got to be careful. And then coming to this realization that I did kind of in my 30s, where it's like, no, man, these are all your friends. And like, that guy's annoying, and he definitely like, oh my God. Oh, like, but it's like, but it's okay. Right. Like, right. We all come together for this thing. And, some people might get really mad and you might have to cool off, but it was almost a recognition that it's like, no, this is the village. Like, these are the people that are going to be there for you, even if we get frustrated with each other. And having that was, kind of gone now, but because it was back in the state that shall not be named. But I build anew slowly.
Right, and that's imperative that we get out there and build those connective groups. And right. I mean, you've got your family, but you also need those social circles outside right. of that. When who do you talk to about, oh my God, the kids are making me crazy, or my wife has this thing that's going on, and I'm like, you need those connections outside of your family, but also strong connections inside of your family as well. So
do you find that I feel like there's a reliance on spouses and family that is much greater than it was in years past. And it's kind of like, we want our spouses to be, our friends. We want them to be our intimate partners. We want them to be like our gurus and our personal trainers and like our financial advisors and, all of these things. And it's kind of like, dude, it's too much. Like, I can't be everything for you. And, at times, like, you need to talk to somebody else because I have my own problems. And right. like, you need to have these other social circles so you can unload, and get the right answers that you need from someone else.
I feel like this question could get me in a lot of trouble.
Oh my gosh.
No, both my husband and I work from home. And we have home offices, but the honest to God truth is, like, if we don't make time for each other outside of work, then we just kind of like drift adjacent to
Yeah,
each
right.
other. And I know what's going on with him because he might like say something on his way to get coffee, and he knows what's going on with me because he can hear me yelling through the floor into his office. But the reality is we all need different touch points because I need people I can connect with who are going to get what I'm going through in my role, who will also keep confidence and who will also like just be able to empathize and be touch points. And many times that person is also my husband, but sometimes he's just like, I can't deal with another weird story from you right now. So, it might be something, and the same is true the same is true. So I think I don't know the answer to that question about our spouses more reliant on each other.
But it's more of, it plays, I think this just ultimately plays into what you're saying, which is we need strong families. Yes. But we also need that village. We need the people outside of our family, if for nothing else, just to unload and like dump some of the stress of our life. And so that we can be a better person when we come back to our family.
Right.
Right.
I personally think it's healthy. We each have our girls groups and our guys groups, and we go out and do things with them and with permission and come home and I'm like, what's going on with these folks over here? And he's like, what's going on with these folks over here? And we have multiple touch points where we can get out and socialize in different groups. And I personally think that's healthy. I am not going to speak for every married couple on the planet. So certainly. And we have also, where a lot of people have said, good luck on working from home with your spouse in the same building. Like, that's worked out really well for us. I like his company. And so, but for some people, that's just going to be, it's going to be a little bit rougher. And that was really pronounced during COVID, right? Because we were stuck in the same pod all the time. And it was like, you're chewing too loud. You're breathing too loud. Like,
Oh, let me just stop breathing.
Yeah, right. So I know, and I had a phone call from a dear friend at one point who said, my wife is such an extrovert. Can you just call her once in a while and just like go on a walk and chat while you're walking and talking during COVID? And I was like, it didn't even occur to me that might be a need of somebody. And he was looking out for her. And that was really a very sweet thing.
That sounds like a nice guy.
He's a nice guy.
Yeah. So for people that are struggling, right? Or for people that know somebody who's struggling, first off, start normalizing it.
Right.
Let's start acknowledging it's like, listen, life is really hard. And, we have people that range in all level of mental duress, some ranging from just anxieties and whatnot, all the way to very severe mental illnesses. So just acknowledge that. Right. And it's, man, especially over the pandemic, that was one thing. It's like, wow, this is really hard. Like life is really hard. Yeah. And going it alone is very difficult.
Yeah.
So work on normalizing it. Work on connections.
You know what? And work on listening. I can't tell you how many times when things were really rough in my family because we had a person who was dealing with a severe mental illness. I can't tell you how many times people were listening with just an ear of like solutions. How do we fix this? Well, tough love this and do that and boundaries this. And it's like, I just needed somebody to listen and not offer to fix it for me, and not judge me. And that's hard. We're a bootstrappy kind of state, right? So everybody has a solution for you. But if we could just listen without the need to fix something for somebody and just be there to empathize, I think that would go a long way to normalizing some of these conversations. It's not wrong or right. It just is what it is. And if people could just put aside that judgment. And that is really a big stressor, by the way, in places of work, for example, where people feel like they fear judgment, job loss, derision if they come forward with their mental health needs or that of a family member. But if you have a spouse with a heart condition or somebody has a major medical issue that isn't mental health, there's people who are organizing, potlucks and bringing you goodies, but you have a mental health crisis. There's no meal train for that. Right.
Yeah.
And with the number of people who are experiencing mental health issues or mental illness in their families, chances are, somebody in your office right now who's coming in bleary-eyed because they were up late waiting for somebody to come home, or they were in the emergency room with a teenager who had suicidal ideation, or something's going on and they're just anxious. Do they feel like they can talk about it around you?
Yeah. That's
I feel like I've been a downer.
No. It's not. I don't think it's a downer. I think it's just looking at that aspect of all of our lives that I think most everyone understands, right? Like I had this really down moment. I think about this because I am generally a very happy person, right? And who I am on camera is literally just who I am. So it's like very easy. Like I just kind of bumble on through the world. Like I work really hard, but I also am very much I don't even know if it's a glass half full. I've just work towards making a more positive world for myself, right? And if I'm tired, I'm like, okay, man, like cut the crap. You got to get 8 hours of sleep tonight or 7 hours of sleep. Or like, look, you know the formula of the things you need to improve yourself, right? Or you need good food, you need water, you need sleep, you need exercise, all these things. It's like, you just put that together just give yourself 48 hours. Do those things for 48 hours. And I guarantee you're going to see a turnaround. Like these are the conversations I have with myself. But that doesn't mean that I haven't had really dark moments. And I had this one time I even think it was before COVID. I went through this really dark time. And I remember being in my SAT class. And again, like I am just kind of who I am. And I reflect on this one particular day. It's like, whoa, dude, you went off the rails with those kids. Because I don't know how I got into this headspace, but I remember telling my students, it's like, listen, I have done my duty as a dad, right? Like my kids are fine. My wife is fine. Like I've done my part. Like if I got hit by a bus now, like just let me take a break. Right. And it was essentially just being like, yeah, like I wouldn't want to fight it. I just like, let it take me. And it was this really dark moment. And I remember even just sitting here, I had these students in the class, and I remember saying that. And like, I remember seeing the looks on their face where they're like, what is Matt telling us right now? And I caught myself. I'm like, what am I saying? Like, what am I doing? And it was a really, really, really dark time for me. And, I obviously made it out of it. And so, no, I don't think what you're expressing is like such a downer. I think it's one of those things where we are all going to come to those moments, right? And at the time, I didn't know what was going on with me. It's like, why am I so like down on this, right? And I think if people recognize, it's like, no, man, like I had that happen to me 5 years ago. Like I had this month where it was just nothing but darkness and like there was no joy in the world and it was really dark and it passed, right? Or like whatever changed in my life, whatever I needed to change, like I was able to get around it. But recognizing that that could happen, or it probably will happen in some iteration. It's like, okay, just know the snowball's coming and it's going to hit you in the face. Don't be that surprised. It's not going to feel good, but like, don't think it's game over.
Yeah. There's always reason for hope. And that is one of our principles of support. And also recognizing that for some people, that might be a one-off. Like right. I've been in that space too. Pretty sure it's a one-off. It was circumstantial based on the stuff that I was going through. But also there are some people that's a chronic condition. Like it just is cyclical for them. And so they have to be really mindful of their healthcare regime and what they're doing to mitigate for that. And others who could be a little bit more empathetic about that, because some of these conditions just keep you from getting out of bed, right? Just keep you from living the life that you're supposed to. And so how are we going to address that? And there are things, even though nothing I'm going to do right now is going to increase the number of psychiatric hospital beds. Nothing that I'm going to do is going to make sure that we have, adequate professionals to serve the population of Idaho. But I can change how I use my language. I can use people first language when I'm talking about mental illness. I can not make it the butt of a joke. I can be empathetic. I can practice those listening skills. I can reach out and just touch base with somebody that I know I haven't talked to for a long time and say, how are you doing? I haven't heard from you and you're important to me. Right. So there are things, we can do things that actually reduce stigma, that increase the conversation. We can educate ourselves on what the conditions are and what the resources are for people. And those are all within our power. And they have changed society in the past. We don't stigmatize cancer anymore. We certainly don't stigmatize polio. There are things that society has decided they were going to change the way they did things, and they changed them. And a lot came after that. That was the systemic stuff, right? The priorities. So there are things that we can do as individuals.
For somebody who's struggling, how do they find you?
NAMI.org. You can get a directory by state.
And
it's
that's
also
NAMI.org.
Correct.
Got it.
And then we have one, NAMIidaho.org, and you can look at our calendar page. It's important to realize that you can join any support group. There's virtual support groups across the country. You don't have to be in that state to join the support group if it happens to meet your particular needs, timing, day of the week. You can join. They're all confidential. They're all free of charge. So looking at NAMI.org for a family support group that works for you, a connection support group that's for the people with mental illness that works for you. If you are concerned, you can come and join a support group and become a facilitator. I mean, we are always looking for people who are willing to put their time out there with lived experience, right? So you can bring somebody in and let them feel safe and talking to you about what their experience is, because you've been there before and you're not there to judge. So that's huge. We have stuff going on all over the state at any point in time. Coming up, we have a resource fair and a movie night at the Flicks on September 11th. There's a movie coming out called The Good Side of Bad, and it's about a family that's dealing with schizophrenia, and just having conversations around the reality of what's going on in these lives, taking that narrative away from that movie sensationalism of the crazy person who goes out and kills 1 million people and because they just are schizophrenic, right? So it's really scary. But just painting a more realistic picture helps reduce that stigma as well. And we'll have some resources there. We'll have some nonprofit groups there who are interested in talking to folks about what's going on. That's at the Flicks on September 11th. Anytime there's a NAMI event, NAMI walks are happening up in Coeur d'Alene and Sandpoint on October 4th. We have our Southern Idaho NAMI walks. That's a 5K walk down here in Southern Idaho communities, Boise, Twin Falls, Pocatello, and Idaho Falls in May. So those are, groups of people who are getting together and doing like a pledged fund drive walk thing, and just and enjoying fellowship and connecting with people. I mean, connection is really important.
Yeah, man. I don't think it could be overstated.
Mm-mm.
Yeah. Well, listen, thank you for coming on today.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I think it is dark, right? But we are dark. Like, we have dark aspects to us. And I don't, again, a very good friend of mine is like, people need to understand, right? Like, we need to stop pretending like we have it together. Like, he's like, I go to therapy. I'm like, hey, I've been to therapy too, right? Like, no problem. And yeah, it's not that we have to be like jokey about it, but just like, yeah, man, this is part of life. Like, I got bad morning breath too.
Yeah.
I work on that. I brush my teeth. Anyway.
But checking in with folks is so key, and letting them know that you care about how they're doing, and just saying, how are you doing?
Yeah.
Are you keeping up with the stuff that you need to do to maintain? And while we're at it, maybe we should go out and take a walk on the Greenbelt, or do some of the great fun outdoor stuff that we know is good for our health, or maybe eating a healthy meal, or maybe just sit down and listen to music together, or whatever,
Yeah.
Connect with your friends.
Yeah, however you connect. I'm not really good just being friends to be friends' sake.
There has to be an activity.
Yeah, and it has to be hard. It can't be a leisurely activity. It has to be really hard.
That's
I know. I have it's like, my type is a very small segment of the population. It's like, if we're not near throwing up, we can't be friends. I'm not a
That's still legit. That's so legit.
Yeah.
Well, look, that kind of connection is still connection. It's, I mean,
Oh yeah, look,
whatever.
Trust me, I know. Like, I get it. Like, it's just, I have a very small selection of people that, I wander around.
Yeah, you're just not going to see me at your jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
So. Sorry to say. I might see you around town, but.
Well, if you ever want to come, they're great spots.
Awesome.
Anyway, thank you for coming in today. Thanks for sharing this stuff. And I'd love
you,
to do
Matt.
this again, like every 6 months or every whenever, to just
Let's
talk
do.
about progress and events coming up and how you guys are helping Idaho.
Thank you.
Awesome.
That'd be
Thank you.
All right.